going to evolve so much. I mean, the thing, it's kind of like the perfect storm. You know, you took an outgoing personality like Lennon, and you take a guy who was a phenomenal musician like McCartney. When I say phenomenal musician, he wasn't classically trained, but he had a perfect ear.
Right, they had the perfect ear.
Basically take any instrument, and then he was much more evolved as a guitar player than Lennon was when they first met. You know, he was basically teaching Lennon. Lennon knew like ukulele chords and stuff that his mother had taught him. So, but Lennon learned very quickly. He was very smart, and then you bring this prodigy and this kid, George Harrison, and with the three of them together and being together all the time, you become very, very tight, and you know what, you have a shorthand, and you created a guitar sound that, you know, people don't think of them as like a guitar band in the sense of like they're not like Led Zeppelin. They don't stand out there and do these phenomenal guitar solos up on a mountaintop with a light and the hair blowing. And the whole thing is that I would rather sit down with a Led Zeppelin album to try to figure it out than figure out what the Beatles are doing. You know, there was a big controversy for years about the opening chord of Hard Day's Night. And Randy Bachman from Bachman Turner Overdrive and the Guess Who actually went to Abbey Road Studios and met with George Martin's son, who is the keeper of the tapes now. And he said, listen, we all want to know what the opening chord is. So they went to the master tapes and they played what the three of them were doing. And each one of them, you know, for years, I think the popular thought was that it's a G minor 6. But it's not. The three of them are playing three different things. And that's how they created that sound. You know, they...
okay. So let me see if I understand this as a layman. In other words, it isn't one chord. It's three guys playing a chord or chord fragments that equal to that sound. So,
well, they're playing like D and F are like overtones in music. So John is playing like a D suspended, what they call a D suspended. It's a very common chord that you hear in rock. Like a good example would be what's that song by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers? You know, she's a good girl, crazy about you. Hear that ding ding.
Oh,
that's
free falling. Yeah, free falling. Right. Free
falling, and like George was playing an F with a G bass, and McCartney was playing a G note. You know, I'm going off the top of my head, but I believe that's what it was. Mm-hmm. You know, to make that din, that pling, that's evolved. You know, we're talking 1964 when they did this. You know, nobody was doing stuff like that.
Well, see, that's what I want to ask about. All right, so now let me get into some of the artistic significance, not so much from the critic side, but from the mechanical side. All right, you're a mechanic on the guitar now, like they were. You live with it. You're intimate with it. Were they superior in their skills, or did they have superior application of good skills?
I think that their natural ability was far beyond what their knowledge was, but they were smart enough and fast learners, and the other key to that was they had a mentor who was musically, classically trained, which was George Martin, who was able to take their ideas and say, you know, this is what you got to do here. So I don't know how he played into that, if that was his idea or he told them to do that or they did it on their own. But the fact of the matter is, you know, people always claim to be the fifth Beatle. George Martin's the fifth Beatle.
No doubt. No, you got that. And you know what? Thank God that finally got on record. Those documentaries really are fascinating, compelling stuff. But now let me come back again, because you're a guy who years ago observed this to me. I never see this in the literature. I'm a Beatle fan, never would have picked up on it. Ever since you mentioned it, you might even know where I'm going right now, but I'll tell it to you. After you mentioned it, it's really fun to do with the Beatles because this was kind of a gray area. John Lennon is a hell of a lead guitar player. I mean, he may be the rhythm guitarist of the time and that, but man, when he does licks and when he puts, what I like is he's like melodically lead when he jumps in. His guitar work stands. Again, I don't know the skill set. It's just so stylized. Like, I love the beginning of Revolution. I love the beginning of Come to. I mean, his songs. What's the other one? Last night I listened to all this stuff. Sure, The Benefit of Mr. Kite. I mean, that could be a nothing song. That could be, but his whole, Lucy in the Sky sound, later. So that's what I really got out of him. He signed everything he did. Then you pointed out to me, he does a lot more guitar work than he gets credit for because he's so incredibly good at everything else he's doing. Am I wrong here? Am I off on the wrong point?
Well, I mean, he was a really, really great rhythm guitar player, which is an underrated job in the music, in bands, because everybody wants to be this guy and stand there, like Jimi Hendrix or Jeff Beck or Eric Clapton and do this blazing solo. And the Beatles didn't do those kind of solos for the most part. I mean, the closest they probably ever got to that was at the end, the very end of the end on the Abbey Road album, where you actually hear all three of them taking turns, including Paul. All three of them are playing lead guitar. So they probably went into the studio, they did the rhythm tracks, meaning the rhythm guitar, the bass and the drums, and probably the piano, did like a scratch vocal or something, and then they went in and stood around a microphone, and each one of them had their guitars, and each one of them took turns trying to outdo each other. And it's very easy. It's very obvious to me who's playing at any given time in that particular song. George's guitar is a distinct kind of melodic sound that he always had, very smooth. Lennon's guitar is very rough. And McCartney's is the odd man out, which you probably don't recognize because he probably didn't play that much lead guitar on the Beatles records earlier, though he did play a lot of acoustic guitar, like on Yesterday and those kind of, And I Love Her and stuff like that. He played some acoustic guitar and that stuff.
So is that I don't want to keep interrupting you, but I'm just trying for the layman. Are they, back then in the early days, are those songs really, they're a lot better skilled musicians than the songs they're playing? They're deliberately playing simple stuff? Or are they learning and getting better album by album, which is the myth? That's what I want to believe.
Well, you know what? They never had any simple stuff. That's the thing about it. If you listen to I Want to Hold Your Hand, the guitar is very sophisticated on it. If you sit down with somebody and say, listen, okay, here's your choice. You can play Whole Lot of Love and you can play that. Whole Lot of Love is a hell of a lot easier to play on guitar than I Want to Hold Your Hand is. I Want to Hold Your Hand has a lot of inversions of chords, a lot of different voicings on the chords, and the timing is impeccable how these guys went in and out of each other, including the bass. I mean, really, man for man, there was no band that could match them.
So
there might have been bands that were louder and rougher, but
right.
There was no band, musician for musician, that could stand next to the Beatles.
Well, now, see, you, I guess, pointed out another one of their geniuses collectively was they were able to pull it off so effortlessly that, She Loves You, all that early stuff. Even, John was dismissive of it, too, at one point. That was then. I'm just curious if you think you get the feel, even from I guess you do, from the earliest stuff, and we're watching A Hard Day's Night, they're already really, really good as musicians that early in life, like the age of 21, 22. They're already there.
Earlier than that.
Sorry?
Earlier than that.
That's what I'm saying. So and then the ages, not to go through the whole biography, but he's in the Quarrymen at what age when McCartney comes to that event and sees the Quarrymen?
Like 15.
15, okay.
Yeah.
So by the age of Ed Sullivan, right, they're 8 years hardcore, right?
Well, I mean, they played every night when they went to when they were in Hamburg. They were playing every night 3 shows a day, whatever it was. You get real tight when you do that. I mean, real tight. And you learn, your playing evolves, because when you're playing all the time, your skills are really up there. If you're playing, like a lot of these bands now, you know, they go off the road for 3 years and then they have to go and rent an airplane hangar. The Rolling Stones have to go rent an airplane hangar and rehearse for a month and a half just to get the songs. And these guys were at the top of their game. They were playing every night. They had to amuse their audience, and they were learning how to play as they were going along. I mean, they were successful pretty much right off the bat. The first record didn't really take off, but by the time they did Please Please Me, they were on the top of the charts. So what happened was there was money to back them to do whatever they wanted to do. So they could go in the studio. I mean, they weren't piano players when they first started. They learned from George Martin. But if you hear the early stuff like I'm Down, where John is playing the piano, he really doesn't know what he's doing. He knows a couple of chords, but he's really, really playing with his elbow. He's doing all this stuff. If you watch the clip from Shea Stadium, he's really learning, and it's very obvious that besides what he was taught by George Martin, he watched Jerry Lee Lewis, and he watched these guys and say, if they could do it, I can do it. You know, even if you go into early songs like I'm Looking Through You, the organ on I'm Looking Through You is played by Ringo. Now, it's pretty easy to learn how to play the chords. The whole thing to that is the syncopation, but he was the drummer, so he can, all of these guys were very, very smart, very gifted. They worked together to learn how to play things together. I mean, if you watch these films of them doing Octopus's Garden, George working with Ringo, this is how it's, and showing him the guitar and showing him, I mean, these guys, they were like brothers. They grew up together. They all had, nobody was not carrying their weight in that band. And for Lennon was, he was the one with the sharp tongue. He was smart. He had a good sense of humor. I mean, if you want to hear something that's really funny, there was a show, I think it's around circa 1969, called the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus. And on that show was The Who. Jethro Tull was a new band. They were on the show. John Lennon comes with his new band, quote-unquote new band, which only played one time, and that was on that show, and he called it the Dirty Mac, which is a dirty raincoat. And it was Lennon on rhythm guitar, Clapton on lead, Mitch Mitchell from the Jimi Hendrix on drums, and Keith Richards played bass. And they did Your Blues, which was a Beatles song.
Right.
And it's really, really raw. It's fantastic sounding. But what's fun, hysterical, is the interview before that between Mick Jagger and John Lennon. It's really, really funny. I mean, John's outstanding thing was his sense of humor. I mean, even if you read his books, they were all wordplay and really, really silly, but they were very, very funny.
And Jagger Jagger was very serious, right?
Well, he's funny in it also. They're both, obviously these are two guys that knew each other very well. They came up together and they played, the Beatles and the Stones played in the clubs at the same time. They were competitors. And I
don't know. Mick always seemed more concerned with his image than John, right? Wasn't John a little bit throw the image?
I mean, Mick controlled the image of the Rolling Stones. I mean, there's no question that I think once, when the Stones started, it's a whole different thing. I mean, originally it was Brian Jones's band, and then Mick and Keith became, the power in the band, the power brokers of the band. So, which is why I guess Brian Jones left for whatever reason, or he just couldn't, keep up with them. But Mick has always been, the businessman in that group. Keith is the musician.
Well, the reason I wanted to mention, I think I told you this once before. There is a YouTube of John very disparaging about Mick Jagger, equating the Stones and the Beatles. When he says, he talks as if we're, and he goes, we did something, then the Stones did it. We put out something, then he goes, check the record, and he starts chiding the journalists. He goes, check the record on this. Just get the record straight. Now, he also said we were old mates. But I think I told you the third thing that I put all together one day on the air is Mick's induction. Talking about John, saying straight up that he had a very big issue with how the Beatles were doing better. And it bothered him. He goes, first of all, they were from Liverpool. He goes, second of all, they had this image with the clothes. And he says it really. So what do you think was there? Healthy or a little bit of actual animus? Do you think it was just healthy competition? Or do you think there was a little bit, that bastard, he's getting away with it?
Well, people are generally in show business, I mean, the type of behavior that they do, for the most part, wouldn't get away like in a normal,
right.
Normal suburb, neighbors, schoolmates, whatever. I mean, a lot of them could be pretty despicable. I think John was probably one of the worst when it came to that kind of stuff. He would be in a good mood. He's very moody, and laugh with you, and then turn around and rip you up in the press, because that's how he felt at the time. And so I think that, because of how his life worked, this is the type of person that he was. People make him out like he was a saint. I don't think he was a saint by any stretch of imagination.
No, he had a dark side, right? I mean, to be fair.
No, there's a school of thought, and I don't know if this is true or not, but Stu Sutcliffe, who was the bass player originally in the Beatles, the first bass player, died of a brain hemorrhage from a beating that he took in Hamburg.
Right.
And the story was that he took the beating from somebody in a bar or a couple of sailors. There are also people who said that he took the beating from Lennon.
From John.
So,
right. That's right.
Yeah, it's been said.
Yeah.
So whether it's true or not, I don't know. Was he beyond that? No, I don't think so. He had a lot of physical. He had a history of physical abuse. He was abusive to Cynthia. He wasn't.
He was scarred. Now, here's a question for you specifically. Again, your take. You like having your bandmates lifelong. This is so do movie people. There are movie people who go, oh man, I've been working with this director of photography for 30 years. We know each other hand in glove. The Beatles are so short-lived now when you see how bands can revive. Also, you live pretty good when you've become famous, that if you can shake off the shallowness and you want to go to work, you can do some amazing stuff. But was this a lost opportunity, or this is just the way it is? They were the first. It's kind of like a meteor. It's got to burn out faster. What's your take on the short life of that band when he was a visionary? He could have come out of all of his phases, come back, but there was no talking to him about this, except for those moments where he goes, oh, well, of course, we might have done it the night of Saturday Night Live, or I wasn't really against it. There's all this, talk where I'm not really... But the fact is it didn't happen. The fact is it was never an issue for him. He never woke up in the morning and wanted the Beatles back. What's your take on it? You love having your band throughout your life.
Well, I mean, I think that, the lifespan of the band was approximately 8 years, 62 to 70. And I think because at that point, they started as teenagers together. And I think at the time the Beatles broke up, they were in their late 20s. They weren't quite 30 years old yet. So I think they were going through the natural thing of, Ringo had gotten married, and John was now with Yoko on his second wife, and, George had married Patty, and, McCartney married Linda, so they were doing, they went their separate ways. Paul wanted to live in the country, so he moved to Scotland, started making these solo records. They all had a lot of material that they needed to put out, and they couldn't do it within the Beatles because, they needed more space than the allotted amount of songs they were given on each album.
But wouldn't they have had the power at the time of the breakup, right? Mm-hmm. Whether they were too restricted by the deal they were in, because I know there's a lot of backstory on Apple being a disaster or good. Mm-hmm. And okay, so take that out of the equation. Just say, even if the whole thing was horrible, if they as a group, because I think you could know this better than me, there are some group dynamics about who is interested. I know Paul always wants to go for the tour and this and that, and they don't want to, but there was a clique going, all right, and then there was always a holdout when it would come to the fore.
They didn't have the kind of touring situations that exist now. Because if they had that kind of touring situation, they might have continued to tour. But they were at the peak where when they performed, they couldn't hear themselves at all. There were no, monitor systems. There was no PA systems the way we know it today. Their microphones were plugged into the public address system that they used to use to call the baseball games. They had amplifiers on stage, and that was it. They weren't mic'd up. They just played as loud as they could. It was just, the system was not set up that you could take a band like the Monkees, the Beatles, bands that had all these big teen followings of girls that were screaming through the whole show. For the Beatles, where they were musically, they couldn't go out and do a song like Hello, Goodbye in that kind of environment. It just didn't exist for them to go out. Now you can. Now you can do anything. But then you couldn't. So do I think at some point they would have all gotten together? I guess so. I mean, I've had a band now with the same guys, some of us for over 40 years. And did we ever have time apart? Yeah. Were there guys that were gone out of the band for, several years at a clip? Yes. Did they all come back? Yeah, they all came back. But the whole thing is, listen, my drummer was gone for 16 years.
Right. Well, you are built on the Stones model. I mean, you're the band that will reliably be there. You wake up one day and either it's a new album or it's a tour or it's something, but they can pretty much rely. That's what I'm saying. The thing about the Beatles to me that's striking is that the post-Beatles, if you go from 70 to 80 when John was killed, that 10 years, they must have had the power to command anything, even if they would only play performing arts centers, even if they would only play for a limited crowd, just to do something. In other words, that urge that Paul seemed to have. Let's perform. Let's play for the, let's write and perform. That didn't seem to matter to the other three. Either I could do this without the Beatles.
The other guys didn't like being told what to do, and McCartney, because when you become the alpha male, and the reason my band has lasted for as long as it did, the majority of the guys in the band just do what they're told. They'll when it comes to the day-to-day business of the band, they let me take care of it. And they want to just show up and do what they they collaborate on things in the studio and stuff like that. But when it comes to like taking care of the business of the band and running the websites and making the CDs and doing, they don't want to be bothered with any of that. So if McCartney had been given a free hand by the other three guys, but what it was the other three guys didn't want to do it. They didn't want to take a back seat. And if you watch the movie Let It Be and you watch the conversation between Paul and George,
oh, that's painful. That's a painful one.
There's a pretty fair scene in there where he says, "Listen, I'll play what you want me to play, or I won't play, or won't play at all." But they were young guys. They had the ego of young guys, and they all knew they were stars.
Right.
And they all had people around them telling them, "You don't have to listen to this guy." So it was, I think, they had to go out, they had to learn the way of the world, and they probably would have came back. And in a sense, they did come back without John. But they, and at many times during that decade, there were partial reunions. Certainly, John's Imagine album has George and Ringo on it. Ringo's Ringo album has all three of them on it, though not on the same song. But John and George and Ringo played together. Paul and Ringo did the Give My Regards to Broad Street movie together, and Ringo played the drummer in his band, and they were on the record together, which was, I guess, an offshoot of Wings or something after Wings. But so they all, and George and Ringo, of course, George was on most of Ringo's records. So I mean, there was that connection there.
All right, let me cover two more things here before we get too far adrift. The relationship between Paul and John. The thing I refer to, and again, we play this stuff on the air because YouTube makes everything available, is Paul discussing John in the acceptance of an award. And John's the feature, so he's accepting for John, and he goes into their relationship. You take his words are beautiful. but there is definitely tension still. Something is there. What do you think was the true relationship bond that made all the songwriting possible, that it got them as far as it got them, and their ability to sing together, which is angelic? It's almost genetic, those two voices. It's almost like one person. So what is that? What was the thing that clicked, do you think?
There is an article in, I think it was last month's Atlantic magazine, called How Genius Works. And he talks about teams of geniuses, and one of the teams that he talks about is John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Now, why there's tension today is because Paul is dealing with John Lennon's estate. He's not dealing with John Lennon. Because Paul and John would sit in a room and they'd have a row, but they would come to terms or they wouldn't. But now he has to deal with Yoko, who I'm sure that McCartney, let's face it, Yoko is whatever Yoko is, but she's Mrs. John Lennon. So she has the power of Lennon's estate. So whether he considers her an equal, which I'm sure he does not, she has no real knowledge of music. That sound she makes is horrible, and what she passes for art, maybe it's art. Peter might be able to give you a better answer on this, but I don't see the art. I don't see it. So what was important is that Lennon saw it. But in the meantime, this is like you've gone away, and now Paul has to deal with John through his estate.
Okay,
and
so that's
sure
the modern.
Not the same
right. All right, so that's the modern side. On the front side, I remember seeing this. I don't know if I did tell it to you. A woman in a documentary says she saw them when they were first friends, sitting at the table, eating, and she said these were two boys that had lost their mom. Mm-hmm. And they were handling it oppositely. Paul was not rough, up in your face. John was. But she felt this for them. I don't know if it was the aunt, but it was somebody who watched them. Could that be it? Could that really be what because something got very deep with them where they might not have been friends in high school. The behavior, they might not have clicked, but music was a gateway to a big relationship they had. And the whole world, it felt that relationship. What do you think?
I think that, John early on had a plan that he was going to do this, and he immediately, even when he couldn't play very well, he saw that he could make a few bucks and he could get the attention of girls doing this. And when he met McCartney, he said, this is a young guy that he's very gifted, I can use him, he will be good for me if I have him in my band. And I think once he got him in there, he realized this guy's even more valuable than I thought. And then in the interim, they became friends. I think they go beyond friends. I think they were brothers in real life. I think they were brothers in real life. I have brothers that are not my blood brothers. I have brothers that they are my brothers. You know what I mean? It's a closeness that you can't put your finger on and say, okay, because we were born of the same mother. I don't think that's how it really works.
Right.
I think when you're there for somebody, and I think in the beginning they had John had a loving home with Mimi. She took good care of him. He wasn't doing without. And the same with Paul. Paul had a good father who took care of business for him. George again was another one. The one who had it the roughest was probably Ringo. But he was the one that was probably lower down the food chain. George came from a more well-to-do family and a complete family.
Right.
But I think that John and Paul, the closeness of them both not having a mother at age 15 and 16, oh, absolutely. I think that's the bond.
Huge.
No question about
Huge. All right, here we go. The big wrap-up, we're going to take our time on this one. The night he gets killed, and then the aftermath now. In other words, what was it like for you when you find out? And now, what does it turn out that he does mean these years down the line? What is his legacy turning into? But first, what was it like that night? Where were you? How did you find out?
Well, honestly, I did not find out that night because I was with somebody and we were somewhere where there was no, we had a tape player or something. There was no outside communication. So I spent the night with somebody and didn't know anything about it. Went home, and, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the cable TV, so I went home, went to bed, and I got up in the morning. There was a note on the kitchen table, and I was young. I lived with my parents. I was 24. And there was a note on the kitchen table about 7:30 in the morning that said, "John Lennon dead." That's exactly what it said.
Wow. Who do you think? Your mom or your dad left that?
My mother left that.
Yeah.
John Lennon dead. So I put on the radio. Jim Kerr was on the radio crying his eyes out on PLJ.
Right.
And I'm like stunned. What happened? And, the rest is history. Everybody knows what happened. But that kind of blew me away. My way of handling it, in all honesty, I never, ever, and I never have, said the guy's name. I don't say his name.
Right.
The guy who did it.
Right.
Okay? I don't give him that
fame.
Satisfaction. I don't give him the fame by association. I will not say his name.
Right.
So that's my way of honoring him, and that's my way of not saying it. Again, he's a person. Lennon was a person like everybody else. He certainly made a big impression on my life. I'm sure that his cheekiness is what appealed to me. I mean, as much as I liked the music at 9 years old, I think I was probably more drawn to their sense of humor in the beginning. And his sing a song. Well, we need some money first. I just thought, this guy's really clever. He's really funny. And then I saw what was happening with the girls, and I said, this might be a good racket to get into,
Right.
And then I started to actually listen to the music and realize how much I liked it, and buying the 45s and then the LPs. As far as his legacy now, I mean, it's been canonized to a certain degree. I think a lot of people that younger people that learn about him, he's this great guy that campaigned for peace, and they probably don't know about some of the other stuff, and it's probably just as well. I mean, you know what? If somebody followed me around with a camera in my 20s and wrote down everything that I did,
right,
I'd be in jail.
Right.
And that's not an exaggeration. So, I think it's unfair, like even they do when they follow some of these kids around today, these celebrities, there's a camera every time they're caught outside of a club in a fight or something. God only knows if, if that happened with Lennon, if they had followed him around in Hamburg, I'm sure it would be a whole different story. But the fact of the matter is, it's what you do later in life. It's when you try to do good. And I think he tried to do good. I don't know that he had a clear idea about how doing it, if having a bed in for peace was really, going to get anybody's attention or change the Vietnam War or whatever, but I think he did what he could.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is that we all knew it and identified the event. It may not have had a big consequence, but certainly when didn't he do bagism too, where they put the bag over their head?
Yeah, they were in a bag, and we're going in a bag for peace.
Right.
And that's cool, but I mean, I don't know what it means in the final analysis, but
right.
It's not like he went out, on a demonstration out in the street and put flowers in the guns of the National Guard. You know what I mean? I don't remember him doing anything like that.
Right.
I don't think he put himself in harm's way. I think he used his platform to come out and say, well, we just got to be peace, and like the Christmas song, and it's Christmas and what have you done? So, it depends on what you think is doing something. I mean, it's very easy for somebody who's a celebrity to have a platform and say, this is my opinion. It doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Well, what's interesting, though, you just reminded me, they put their stamp on both Christmas and Happy Birthday. Right? I mean, those are two of the toughest things in universal world culture to have any success with. They have a birthday song, and they have the Christmas song. Wow, that's crazy. All right, so now, are they necessarily diluted, and they have to reemerge like the other classics, Mozart and Beethoven, they get rediscovered because of the amount of music that comes out? It's a tsunami.
I think that the Beatles had a hold on a radio, probably till the mid-'90s. I mean, a pretty strong hold, and it started to wane a little bit, and then they came back with the Beatles anthology, and now because you're coming out with all these formats, when CDs came out, everybody put the CDs, and the movies came out on DVD, and now they're reissuing the vinyl and mono and stuff like that. So a lot of kids are discovering them for the first time, and the fact of the matter is, the music's good. That's what's going to hold up. The music doesn't age. It's not like you sit there and listen to, like if you listen to Herman Termits, you go, oh yeah, this is really hokey.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's not hokey. It's the real deal. And
no, it is the real deal.
Is every song perfect? No, there's a handful of the songs that aren't great, but not too many.
Not too many, and I did an old drill. You'll recognize this because of our age, right? The Beatles and I really were at the right age together for Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, Magical Mystery Tour, White Album, Abbey Road, Let It Be. So last night, that's what I did. I just tracked through them. And it is incredible. I mean, they do it all over again. Like they make you think about stuff. They comfort you. They get you aroused. I mean, they really run this whole And then I also am always taken by the number of tracks on every album. 17 tracks, 15 tracks. I mean, they really were prolific.
Well, I mean, as a musician, if you want to learn, like, for instance, to be a guitar player, sit down with the Beatles and go through every album and figure out the songs. And you're going to sit there and go, even on the early stuff, Beatles for Sale and stuff like that, you're going to sit there and go, holy crap, I can't believe, what's this inversion? What's this chord voice that he's using? Oh, that's a D chord, but what's that other note? Oh, it's an F sharp. You just sit there and go, there's so much stuff going on those records. It's amazing. The vocals, and the fact that they would sit there and say, you know what? We need to learn, we need a keyboard on this song. All right, Ringo, I'm going to show you how to do this thing. And, that they would gain for trying anything. And in turn, they created a different sound on virtually every song. If you're listening to the early stuff and you hear stuff like, I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, Norwegian Wood. This is very adult stuff for
Norwegian Wood
that they were portraying.
You know something? It's funny you bring that up. Last night, because it's on that slide bar now. Remember years ago we had to lift up the needle or you had to go hit the CD button. Last night I was able to slide that. I played Norwegian Wood. My neighbor must have thought I was crazy. About 5 times in a row. Because that was always an imaginary movie to me. The beautiful girl, the bathtub, the whole
thing. It's probably true. It's probably it's a one-night stand that Lennon had.
Yeah.
And on top of it, what's interesting about that song, too, is the first use of the sitar.
Oh, is that right? Right. There you go. Also, you know what I love? I love that she's a working woman. I love that already that early on. The chick is going to work and he's not. Yeah, it's a great song.
Well, what they don't say in the song, but what happened now when you listen to it as an adult, you never thought, because when I heard him as a kid, he went off to sleep in the bath. I go, wow, that's pretty silly, sleeping in the bath. Well, of course, he did what he had to do first in the bedroom. Then she needed her sleep, so he didn't want to disturb her because he's up all night. He's nocturnal. So he went, sat in the tub, lit up a cigarette, read a newspaper, crashed in the tub.
That's it. By the way, one of his funniest scenes in Hard Day's Night is in the tub. I love when he drowns himself.
When he's going to war with the little
battleship.
Submarine.
Yeah, that's right. Then they go looking for him, and he pretends he drowned in the tub, and he's gone. Then he comes in the room, and he's dressed. Oh, man, I miss this guy. All right, it's great talking to you about him, because you know a lot about him, and he had big influence on us. What do you want to plug? What are you going to do? Are you taking off holidays? You're not doing anything? No Christmas jingle ball festivals, are you?
Everybody can always go to www.oldies.com. It's funny, on there they have a list of their 100 best-selling Christmas albums. And I have about 4 in there, I think. If you go to Collectibles Records on their GarageBand, Christmas Volumes 1, 2, and 3, and then also another album called Christmas in America, which we had Jay and the Americans on it, the Bay City Rollers, and we had the Blues Magoos, and the Human Beings, and a bunch of '60s guys doing a bunch of new songs. And so they're still hanging in there in the top 100. And they're a couple of years old, but they're reasonably priced, and people should go there and buy them all for Christmas.
Absolutely. Great gifts. All right, so you go to oldies.com, and then you'll see collectible records, and you have 4 in the top 100.
Yeah, GarageBand, any GarageBand series CD that's on there, GarageBand Christmas, GarageBand Halloween, GarageBand Beatles, GarageBand Monkeys, GarageBand Rolling Stones. They're all produced by me, and also you can get the Best of Pat Horgan is on the road called "Don't Go Where the Road Don't Go."
Now, when did that become available? Don't Go Where the Road Don't Go.
That was released in 2009.
Okay, good.
And it's a 10-song CD. The record company picked some of the songs, and we tried to put some covers on that album because we actually had never released covers before that. So we've got a live version of Jumpin' Jack Flash from CBGB's. We have a live version of a song called Too Much Second All, which is a Johnny Winter song, which is also from that same night in CBGB's. And then there are, I think there's 4 covers on the album. We did 2 songs by Mountain. We did Theme from Imaginary Western and for Yashka's Farm on it.
Wow. Good stuff, man. All right, well, those are all great gifts. So oldies.com is where you can find the 4 albums, and, we'll talk to you. Oh, so by the way, next time we talk, it'll be a day after Christmas. What are you doing for Christmas? You're going to get snow? Are you supposed to get...
I don't know. I tell you the truth, I've been too busy. It's been a really hectic week. I haven't really even thought about what's going on with the weather or what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything major. I'm going... Sunday, the boys and I are going down to see Mom, and... that'll be our Christmas visit there on this Sunday.
Oh, right on. We'll tell Peg I said hello.
I will.
You do it. A little Eddie Tyll from around the corner.
She knows. I talk to her all the time.
At Edward Tyll.
She calls you Edward.
Edward.
You're Edward.
Edward. Edward. He lives over there on Morris Park, Patrick. I remember sitting on your porch.
Edward. You sure when she talks about my friends, you're always Edward.
That's great.
Which I'm sure you like.
I love that. Well, you know what I really love? I can tell you this. I love waiting for you to come out. She would come out and check the weather, put her hands on her hips, look up and down the street and go, "Oh, pretty good day. All right, how are you, Edward?" Like that. And I would go, "Okay." And then she'd vanish. And then, you'd come out, and then it was time for...
Everybody was always called by their proper name. Tony Rubo was
Anthony.
Nobody was called by Bobby Rogers was Robert.
Robert.
Everybody was called by their proper name.
Love your mom. All right, Merry Christmas to her and to your sis also, and to you and yours at home, the boys and everybody, okay? And to your lady. I'll talk to you next week.
All right, brother.
All right, brother, you got it. Excellent. Really enjoyed it today. Really good job. All right, awesome. There you go. Screw Barack Obama. I can listen to Barack Obama. You're going to be crazy.
The bass guitar. Mama used to sing
Pat Horgan, Thunder Road. You heard it. Go to oldies.com. Patronize his albums. The band is on 4 albums in the top 100. You can also go to Thunder Road. Excuse me, let me give it to you correctly. Facebook.com. Pat Horgan, Thunder Road. Facebook.com / Pat Horgan, Thunder Road. All one word. PATHORGAN, Thunder Road.
And the band takes a break. My throat is dry and my fingers ache as the people finally.